Hello everyone, welcome back to another video of Pocket Plan project, and today we are going to set up our user session management and authentication. So before working on our plan page, I want to work on our user authentication and session management because we will be requiring our plan page to be accessible only to the authenticated user. So for that, let's create a new context for our authentication management. So for that, let's create a new context in our project called auth context, and it will be inside the app folder. So let's create a new folder called context. Let's call it context and create a new file here called auth context.tsx, and here we need to define our auth context. So let's export and create the auth context. So export const auth context and use the use context hook. So use not the use context but create context from React, and let's define a type also, and initially we will define it as undefined. So for this, let's create a new type for our auth context inside lib TypeScript, and we already have a file auth.ts. Let's create a new type here. So export type auth context type, and it will have a boolean value. So is auth user and type of boolean, and that's all what it will have. So let's close this and import the type here. So let's import auth context type, and let's also union this with undefined so it is better now. And we need to mark this as client component to use the create context hook. So let's mark it use client, and then we need to create a provider function. So export default function and call this auth provider, and it will receive a children component. So children, and that will be from children of type react node actually, and let's create it. So firstly, let's get the Firebase app. So const fire app equals Firebase app from lib Firebase app. Then we need the const Firebase auth, and we can get it from get auth from Firebase /auth and pass the Fire app here. Then we need to go to the Firebase documentation and use a function there. So let's open our Firebase docs, and inside docs we go to build, then authentication, then we select the web, and then we click on get started, and below you can find a section that allows the management of our authentication. So first we need to import get auth. We have already imported get auth. Then we need the on auth state change from Firebase auth. So let's get it also. So firstly we need to create a state here called, let's call it auth state and set auth state. Then we need to use the use state hook of type auth context type, and we can define the is auth user as false for initial values. And then we need to use the use effect hook to track our authentication state. So let's create it, use effect, and pass an arrow function and pass an dependency array also of type Firebase auth, because we want to track the user authentication state. So inside use effect hook, we need to call our on auth state change function. So let's call it, and firstly we need to cache the result of it. So let's call it const unsubscribe equals on auth state change from Firebase auth. Then we need to pass the Firebase auth variable, and then we need to cache the user here. So user, then arrow function, and here we need to check if user exists. Then we need to set auth state as true. So is auth user as true, otherwise we will set it as false. So let's copy it and create an else block here and set this to as false. And then we need to call the unsubscribe method in the return statement. So return and parentheses equals arrow function and call the unsubscribe here. And then we need to return the auth context here. So return, let's say auth context, and we need to pass the value here. We can pass the auth state here, and then we need to pass a children here. So children, and that's all what we need to do in this function. So let's save it. Then we need to use this auth provider and auth context inside our React components. So first of all, let's use this in our header. So let's go to components, header, and open the header.tsx files. Then we need to go to header nav items, and inside profile menu we need to use the auth context state here to dynamically render the auth profile menu or unauth profile menu. Currently it is hard coded with this variable. So inside header nav items we need to actually wrap our profile menu here. So let's bring it down, and we need to say auth provider from app context auth context, and we need to cover it with the auth provider. And we can call this auth provider in only client components. So our current component is the client component. So let's save it and open profile menu, and here we need to say auth state, and it will be type of auth context type or undefined. So that's also declare the undefined and set it to value use context from React, and we can pass the auth context here. Okay, then we need to use the auth state here. So let's delete this and say auth state dot is auth user, and it will dynamically render the profile menu for authenticated user and unauthenticated user. So let's save it and test it. So currently I think we are not logged in. So let's refresh and check the profile menu here. We have sign in and sign up. Okay, we are logged in currently because it is showing logout button here. And I think we currently don't have any logout functionality. Let's check it. Auth profile menu, and we only have a button here that shows logout. So we need to add the functionality to log out a user. So let's do that only. So let's add the functionality of logout. So first we need to create a function here, async function, and call this handle logout or sign out, I should say. Let's say it sign out instead of logout. So sign out, and here also sign out, and then we need to call the sign out function. So sign out from Firebase auth, and we need to pass the auth here. So let's import that only. So inside handle sign out we need to call the Firebase app. So fire app equals Firebase app. Then we need to create a auth variable here. So Firebase auth equals get auth, and pass the fire app here. Then we need to pass the Firebase auth here, and that's only what we need. So then we can call the then function here, and we can actually redirect the user to login page. So let's do that. So here we need to say, actually let's import the router from next navigation. So const router equals use router from next navigation, and here we need to say router dot push, and it will go to auth slash sign in, and then we need to catch any errors if there are any errors. So catch, and we call it error object, and we need to pass an arrow function here, and we need to say if error instance of error, but actually we can just throw the error here. So throw new error and say failed to sign out the user error, and pass the error.message here. That's all what we need to do. So let's save and link the function to the button. So on click we need to say handle sign out. So let's save it and try to log out the user. Let's refresh the page here, and if we click on profile we are seeing sign out here. Then we need to click on sign out and we are redirected to the sign in page. And if we refresh here we should not see the sign out button. Instead we are saying sign in and sign up. So we are successfully logged out. Let's also confirm it on the home page. So we are seeing sign in and sign up. So our sign out functionality is ready. Let's close it now and continue working on our user session management. So let's close this also. But before that, let's commit our changes first of auth contacts and login functionality. So let's get status here, and we are seeing some files modified and added. So get add dot and get commit dash m, that is add on context and sign out functionality. So let's push the changes to GitHub also. So git push origin main, and that's a successful push message. So let's refresh our GitHub repository here, and we should see 10 commits. Okay, we are seeing 10 commits. Add auth contacts and sign out functionality. So now let's talk about user session management and authentication. So first of all, for user session management, we need to get the user's ID token from the Firebase by calling get ID token function on the Firebase user. Then we need to pass the token to the server and verify it on the server to make any changes to our other functionalities such as Firestore database and real-time database, etc. Then we need to create the session cookie to persist our user session and remove the session cookie when signing out. So let's go to the Firebase documentation first. So we need to go to the firebase.google.com/docs. Then we need to click on build, that is authentication. Then we need to go to the admin section, and here we need to click on introduction. So the introduction of Firebase Admin SDK says that we can manage users with it, set up a custom authentication and identity verification, and we can do a lot more with Firebase Admin SDK. So what we are interested in is that identity verification. So let's scroll down and click on the ID token verification button, and it is saying if your Firebase client app communicates with a custom backend server, you might need to identify the currently signed in user on that server. So this is saying exactly what we need to do in our case, and it is saying to verify ID tokens with Firebase Admin SDK, you must have a service account. So first we need to create a service account. Let's go to this link here, and it is saying add the Firebase Admin SDK to your server. So let's do that here below. So we have the everything updated and installed in our Pocket Plan project. Then we need to set up a Firebase project and service account. We already have a Firebase project. Then we need to add the SDK here. So we will be using Node.js. The Firebase admin Node.js SDK is available on npm. Run this command npm install Firebase admin dash dash save. So let's stop our development server here and install npm install Firebase dash admin dash dash save. I think this is the correct command, and this is the correct command. Let's hit enter here, and it is currently going to install the Firebase admin SDK. Okay, so we have successfully installed. Let's run the development server again, npm run dev, and we are back online. Then we need to import the initialize app from Firebase admin app. We will do it in a moment. So next step is initialize the SDK. Once you created a Firebase project, you can initialize the SDK with Google application default credentials, and this is the recommended way of doing it, by initializing the SDK with Google application default credentials. But the problem is that we are not in a Google environment, so actually we need to scroll down to the section initialize the SDK in non-Google environments. So in order to do that, we need to generate a private key file for your service account. In the Firebase console, open settings and service accounts. So let's go to the settings here and click on project settings and click on service accounts here. So let's select the Firebase admin SDK and click on the generate new private key while selecting the Node.js here. So let's click on it and it is saying generate new private key. Your private key gives access to your project's Firebase services. And this is simply a warning saying you should not share your private key with anyone. So let's click on generate key and it will generate a key for us. So a file has been downloaded, so let's open it and we need to extract these key value pairs from here into our environment files. So let's do that. So let's copy this value here and create a new value in our environment file. So .env.local and we can just align it here and we can have our private key file below. So let's create a new field here and we don't need to append the next public keyword here because we will be using it in our server. So let's say Firebase project type and we can paste the value here. So let me just quickly do it. Okay, so I have extracted the values from our private key file into our environment file which we'll be using in a moment. So let's save it and we can close this file here and we need to continue with our documentation. So we have done these steps. Now we need to continue working on our verify ID tokens. So it is saying let me just select web here and we actually need to move down here verify the token using Firebase admin SDK. So the next thing to do is actually working on our server here. We need to verify ID token pass from the client and then we can have a decoded token and user ID from that decoded token. So now let's actually go to our project here. We can safely close our .n local file here and we need to create a new folder inside app folder and call this API. This is a special folder by NextJS which allows the API methods, that is the application programming interface methods, to communicate with our server through using functions like get, post, put, etc. So here we need to create a new folder and call this Firebase, and inside Firebase we need to have a new folder called create session, and inside create session we need to create a new special file called route.ts. This is also a special file and we need to specify the file name as it is because it will be treated as a route to our fetch function. So let's create it. So here we need to say export async function and in capital post, and it will receive a parameter called request of type request, and it will return a response.json. So response.json as success as false. So what we need to do now is get the token from the client and we can get it from the request body. So let's get it. So let's define const and inside parentheses we need to destructure our request.json here. Then we can get our id token, and we actually need to await this call and the error is gone. So next thing we need to create our Firebase app from Firebase admin SDK. So let's define it. Firebase app equals, then we need to say get apps from Firebase admin app. So this will get all the Firebase apps currently running in our server, and if its length is 0 we need to actually initialize our Firebase admin app here. So let's use a ternary operator here and we need to call the initialize app from Firebase admin, and we need to pass some credentials here. So let's start credential here, and inside credential we need to specify our cert here, and inside cert we need to pass our environment variables that we have created from the private key file. So let's do that. So here we need to open our the private key file and copy the keys from here. So let's open it and we need to align it downwards. So let's copy these keys here. So type will be So type will be process dot n dot, we need to copy it from the environment variable files. So let's copy this here and paste it here. Next we need to do the same for project ID, and let me just quickly do it for you. Okay, so I have copied our keys from the private key file and the values from the environment files, and currently it is giving me some error that object title may only specify non properties and type does not exist in the type service account. So what we need to do is actually ignore this error, so we can add a double slash at the rate ts ignore here to ignore this error from TypeScript, and then we need to pass the colon get app here, which will get the default app for our Firebase server. If our length is not equals to 0, so it will get the default app. So then we need to verify and decode our token here. So const decoded equals, and we need to call get auth here from Firebase admin auth, and we need to pass the Firebase app here. Then we need to call verify id token, and it is returning a promise, so we need to await our call here. So let's just pass the token here. So id token here, and we need to await this call, so add await in front of function here. So next we need to destructure our decoded object here. So const and equals to decoded here, and we need to get the user id, that is uid, and then we need to check if uid exists. If uid exists, then do something to actually create session cookie. So create session cookie here, and else we can return just success as false. So let's create the session cookie here. So call session cookie equals await get auth from Firebase admin auth. I think actually here Firebase admin auth. So let's pass the Firebase app here, and we need to call the create session cookie function here. So it will receive an ID token. So let's pass the ID token here. Then it will receive cookie session options. So here we can define our options such as expiring time of our cookie. So expires in. So let's create the const expires in variable here and set it to 1000 into 60 into 60 and into 10. So this 1000 is for milliseconds, and this for minutes, then it's hours, and then it is the days. So our session cookie will expire in exactly 10 days. So we are passing our variable here. Then we need to close this call and check if session cookie exists. Then we need to call await, and then we need to say cookies from next headers, and we need to set the cookie here. So let's call it session token and pass the session cookie here, and we can define some extra options to our cookies such as http only. Let's set it to true, and max age will be the expires in divided by 1000, and then we have secure as true. So this was the setup that we need to do to verify our ID token here. Then we need to create session cookie here, and if session cookie exists, we need to actually create the session token here with the session cookie provided and set some additional options to it. Next we need to return success as true. So return response .json, and we need to say success as true, and that's all we need to do in this route file. So let's save it, and let's go to our open our sign in form from components auth and sign in form. So here we need to actually call our API route here with fetch function. So let's do that here. So let's delete these console logs here, and we are getting that ID token from the Firebase, and then we need to pass the token to the server using fetch calls. And to do that, let's create a new folder inside our lib and Firebase folder. So let's create a new file, call this create session .tsx, and we need to export a new function here. So export async function and call this function as create session. So create session, and it will receive id token of type string. So let's call the fetch here. So const response equals await and fetch. We need to pass the API route here. So API forward slash. Let's see what the route was. So API slash Firebase slash create session, I think, and then we need to configure this fetch request. So method will be post. So method is actually post, and then we need to provide the content body here. So body equals json dot stringify and pass the id token here, and we need to call this id token, and actually it will be an object here. So let's convert it to an object, and the name id token will be assigned that we are fetching in the post request here. So let's go to our create session function and add a, that is the content type inside headers. So let's do that here. So let's say headers, and it will receive content type, and it will be of type application forward slash json. Then we need to add a comma here, and that's all what we need to do here, and then we need to add a semicolon here. Let's save, and then we can just return the response.json here. So return await response.json, which is the result of our fetch request. So let's save it. Let's go into sign in form and create a new variable here called result. So const result equals, let's call the function await, but was the function name create session, I think, create session from Firebase create session, and we need to pass the id token here. So let's pass the token here, and it is giving some error. Argument of type promise string is not assignable to parameter of type string, and actually we need to await here, I think. So it's returning a promise of string. So let's await this call here, and we should good to go here. Then await expressions are only allowed within the async functions. So let's make it an async function here. So async, and everything is good now. So we need to check here if result is success is true, then we need to reroute the user to the home page. So let's also import the router here. So let's import it here. So const router equals use router from next navigation, and then we need to call the push method here. So if result is success, we need to router dot push to the home page that we are successfully logged in, and our profile will here update to log out or sign out. So let's actually remove this success message here because we don't need it anymore, and let's save it, and let's test the functionality here. So let's open our console window for checking any errors. So let's go refresh our home page, go to the sign in page here, and we need to let's pass invalid credential first. So xyz, or maybe alexa@gmail.com, password 123456, and let's click on sign in. Failed to sign in user, invalid credentials. Let's pass correct credentials abc@gmail.com and password 123456. Let's click on sign in, and we should be redirected to home page, and there is a error, actually failed to sign in user error, response unexpected end of json input, and we have a lot of messages in our console window. So let's read that. Cannot read properties of undefined reading internal inside API Firebase create session. Okay, so I have figured it out, but the error was actually we are importing initialize app from Firebase admin. but we need to import it from the Firebase admin app. So let's add it initialize app here and read this import statements. So now if I save it and test it again, so let's open our console window here and refresh the page. Let's enter correct credentials abc@gmail.com, password 123456, and click on sign in button. Then we are redirected to the home page and we are successful in creating our session cookie. So let's verify the session cookie by opening the developer tools by F12 key and going to application and then the cookies here and the localhost 3000. So actually we don't have any cookies here, or actually we have the cookies are hidden here. So we have the session token here that verifies we are successful in creating the session token and session for our user. So now let's implement our sign out functionality also, because it will be incomplete without sign out. So let's do that here. So inside API Firebase folder, we need to create a new folder here that is sign out session. So sign out session, and we need to create a new file inside sign out session called route.ts and create the post request here. So export async function called post and it will receive a request of type request, and then we need to return the response.json as false for now. Actually success as false. So let's save the file, and what we need to do here, we need to actually delete our session token cookie here. So let's call await cookies from next header dot delete function. Actually we need the parentheses here, then we need to delete the session token here. That will delete the session token we have just created by signing in our user. So let's save it and use it inside our header here. So let's go to the components and header. Then we need to go to the auth profile menu, and here we have a single sign out function that we can call. So let's create a new variable here called result, and we need to create a new function for that. So let's create a new file inside lib folder, firebase folder, and create a new file here called sign out session.tsx, and here we need to export a function async function called logout, actually not logout, sign out session. Then here we need to say const response equals await fetch and pass the API route. So API, that is sign out, I think sign out session, add the firebase also. So firebase slash sign out session, and then we need to configure it. So method will be post, so post, then we need the headers here for the content type, that will be application / JSON, and then we need the body. Actually we don't need the body here, we need to just define these two things. So let's add a semicolon here and return the result here. So response.json with await, let's add await also. So now if we save and use this function inside our auth profile menu component and inside our handle sign out function. So let's remove the comment here and call await sign out session, and if result dot success is true, then we need to call the sign out here and catch any errors. So let's move this code inside here, and everything is good. So let's save and test the functionality here. So let's refresh the page. So we have a session token cookie here, and if we now log out our user by clicking on sign out, we should see the session token has been removed. So let's click on it, and the session token is gone and we are not redirected to sign in page for some reason. Let's check the console, and we have post request API Firebase sign out session. Everything is good, but we are not returning successes true, I think, inside our sign out session. Yes, so let's add a if statement here. So if await cookies dot get session token, then we need to return success as true. So return response dot json as success as true, and otherwise we can return just false, and we also need to await these false. Actually we don't need these awaits here, so let's remove that. Let's save and test the functionality again. So let's open our console window and the cookies here. Let's first sign in the user. So let's go to the auth sign in page, and here we need to sign in with correct credentials, password 123456, and click on sign in button, and we are redirected to home and session token is generated. Then if I sign out the user, the session token is gone and we are redirected to the sign-in page. So this was the introduction to the Firebase user session management and authentication. Next we need to work on our plan page, so let's do that in the next video. But before ending the video, let's commit our changes also. So let's open our git bash here and then git status here. So we have modified sign in form, auth profile menu, and installed Firebase admin SDK. Then we have new files created. So let's git add all of them, then git commit -m and say install Firebase admin and implement session management with Firebase admin SDK and cookies. I think this is a fine commit message. Let's push the code to GitHub. So git push origin main, and everything should be good. Let's check our repository here. So if I refresh the GitHub repository, we are seeing 11 commits, and the latest commit is install Firebase admin and implement session management with Firebase admin SDK and cookies. So this is it for this video now. Let's see you in another video.